Aaron Schatz. I'm your host for Football Outsiders Live. We are coming to you live now on YouTube every day at 1 p.m. Eastern. And Mondays, we review the weekend games and we preview Monday Night Football. So we broadcast live every day during the week, live at 1 p.m. All of our shows are available afterwards on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app under the title Football Outsiders Podcast Network. We are also simulcasting on Twitch and Facebook and Twitter and apparently LinkedIn, which a lot of people use and I never do. So hello to all of you watching on LinkedIn. With me today to review Week 4's NFL slate of games is Ian O'Connor, Senior Data Analyst at EdjSports. How was your Week 4, Ian?
It was good. There wasn't really as much excitement as we've had in the last few weeks, at least from the games I was watching. It seems like that winless Jets and Titans game was the most excitement that I had going on in the day. But outside of the NFL, it was good to see my Kentucky Wildcats in college finally beat Florida at home. So it's been a good start to the season for them as well. So overall, pretty good weekend of football action.
I went 5-0 in my ESPN best bets. So thank you to the EdjSports app for helping me pick 3 unders that hit. It was a
which were those?
What'd you say?
Which ones were those?
Let's see. Browns Vikings under. Ravens Broncos under, and Texans Bills under.
Yep, the Browns Vikings was one that kind of surprised me when I was looking at it, but doing our betting preview last week said, there's two top 10 offenses, but still don't be surprised to see them come under. I think I mentioned to you last week too, we're looking at some things that the second half, both teams' defenses were much better than in the first half, and I think most of the scoring came in the first half in that one, and it was pretty quiet the second half, so that was a good one. We did pretty well there.
Before we dive into recapping the biggest plays from Week 4 and some of the most impactful plays, I want to remind everyone that we'll have this show for you available every Monday throughout the NFL season. Be sure, if you are joining us live, to chat with us and ask questions. Click that subscribe button on whatever platform you're choosing to view us on. And we're going to have great football content coming your way every day. And my script repeats here everything I already just said. So I'm not going to say it again. Let's dive into a Week 4 recap instead. Now, before we talk about win probability, we have to talk about a game where win probability was never in question. And that is the Buffalo Bills 40, Houston 0. Because this turned out to be the best defensive game in DVOA history.
Wow.
Yeah. 5 turnovers for the Texans, plus a fumble that they recovered themselves. And in today's ridiculously high offensive environment, like this was just a colossal, ridiculously bad offensive game. The Bills had a minus 134.6% defensive DVOA. Now, our opponent adjustments are only at 40% right now. So you might say, okay, well, you're not fully adjusting for the Texans. What happens if you fully adjust for the Texans? If you fully adjust for the Texans, it comes out as minus 127.4, which is still the best defensive game ever. It narrowly beats a 1989 Week 1 game where the Browns beat the Steelers 51-0.
It's unbelievable.
Go Bills.
Almost as unbelievable as the Browns beating the Steelers 51-0. But
the Bills have the third best defense that we have ever measured through 4 weeks. So
that's paired with that offense too. It's a pretty scary team.
Bills Chiefs next week is going to be awesome, and probably will be talked about on this show next Monday when it comes to in-game decisions. A lot more than yesterday's Bills-Texans game will be talked about, because there's really not a lot of in-game decision-making to discuss when you beat a team 40-0.
Yeah. And one thing to note, though, we'll give some credit there, is that I think David Culley had a pretty good decision early on in that game to go for it on fourth down. We kind of hammered him a couple weeks ago, but he knew what he was in for. So I didn't really see a ton of that game, to be honest, because they're at some point in the second quarter, I think there really was no win probability, you said, to be added or lost. But he made a good fourth down decision early in the game. So it was good to see him at least trying there.
Yeah, field goals are not going to beat the Bills when you lose 40-0.
No.
All right, let's talk about Sunday Night Football, the most anticipated homecoming on record. Tom Brady returning to Foxborough to face Bill Belichick and the Patriots. The game was a lot closer than anticipated, especially given I was shocked that the Patriots played basically a cover one defense the whole game, man coverage against those great Tampa Bay Buccaneers receivers, and covered them really close. Brady was missing guys. I don't know whether the ball was slipping a little bit because of the rain or whether it was his nerves, but he was high on a number of passes. But in the end, the Bucs actually beat the Patriots when they went to kick a field goal and Nick Folk clanged a 56-yarder off the upright. And the Patriots were competitive for most of the game, but there were a couple of really big errors in this one that sunk their chances. So tell me about the things that EdjSports saw in this game as far as Belichick's decisions.
Yeah, and starting with the pregame, you mentioned it was closer than most anticipated. This was a game that we actually talked about in our betting preview on Thursday. Looking at this, we had this closer to like a 3-point spread, I think, compared to 7 or 8 points in the market. So we thought this one would be pretty close, and it was. And it came down to some important decisions that had to be made, that there were some costly errors. So the final drive of the game, Patriots had 3rd and 3 with just over a minute remaining in the game. Mac Jones's pass was incomplete, which cost them 28% in win probability. This came out to be our 4th most impactful play of the weekend. And part of this decrease can be explained by the decision that came on the next play. So they committed a kind of a double whammy. They elected to go for the field goal down 2 with only 59 seconds remaining in the game. This decision decreased the Patriots' pre-snap win probability by 10.2%. So the way that our impactful plays work is it looks at, or most win probability models looks at the pre-snap win probability based on the play called, and then the pre-snap win probability based on the next play called. So if Belichick would have chosen to go for it, this would have only been about an 18% win probability decrease on that 3rd down and completion. But because he chose to kick the field goal, they've got 10% less on that following play. So that was just a huge play calling error that not only gave them a big error in our worst decisions, but also propped them up to the biggest, 4th biggest, most impactful play of the weekend that negatively impacted them. So couldn't be redeemed. Like you said, Nick Folk missed the kick, clanged off the upright there, wasn't able to get a nice bounce. Didn't get it the right way that Justin Tucker did last week, just went right off the face of that left upright, missed it, cost them the rest of their win probability. They were at 31.9% before that kick, and ultimately that cost them the game. It was the 2nd most impactful play of week 4, that 31.9% drop on the missed field goal.
And you have to point out, why was the Patriots' win probability only at 31.9% when they were about to go ahead?
Yeah, and that's, you look at it, they've still got a minute left. You're looking at Tom Brady on the other side. The Buccaneers still have 2 timeouts left. All they need is a field goal to win that game. And like we saw in, I think it was week 1, he had a minute 24 and no timeouts left against the Cowboys, marched right down the field, and they won the game. So it's something you definitely have to account for. We looked at it this morning. Frank, one of our co-founders, Frank Frigo, wrote at a little addendum in our his risky business column, and went over that, looking at, based on the 4th and 3 probability of conversion, as well as the conversion on that field goal, or the increased conversion rate on the field goal if you're able to convert 4th down and move, compared to, Tom Brady on the other side. What are his chances of leading a game-winning drive, even in the rain? Pretty much a minute left. I think it would have been around 55 seconds and 2 timeouts to get 40, 45 yards maybe for a decent field goal there.
Yeah, if you convert the 4th and 3, you take the rest of the time off the clock and you get a better field goal opportunity. Yep. Versus even if you get the field goal, which you're not sure you're going to get because it's really long, you're giving Tom Brady enough time to come back. It was a big error. Interesting, the Patriots actually ended up with the higher DVOA for this game, 10% versus -16 for Tampa Bay. Post-game win expectancy, which is my formula that figures out, based on the DVOA splits in this game, how likely is it that each team would win, says the Patriots would have won this game 57% of the time. So, yes, and SF Vanderpool points out Tampa Bay probably still would have somehow come back to win, even if they hit the field goal. But if they hit the field goal with time expiring, Tampa Bay could not come back to win. So that's another reason why they should have gone for the 4th and 3. Lots of attention on the Patriots, but there was another AFC East team that had a few interesting plays. Believe it or not, it was the JETS New York Jets. They needed overtime, got their first win of the season against the Titans from the pitiful AFC South. And this game was actually full of impactful plays and impactful calls. Take it away, Ian.
Yeah, despite the win, Robert Saleh had a few bad calls late in this game that could have led to them not getting that first win. Starting the third quarter, the Jets faced a 4th and 1 on their own 29-yard line, chose to punt instead of attempting to go for it down by 2, which resulted in a 5.1% win probability loss. This is one we hear, we're not going to beat a dead horse on this one. 4th and 1, 1 yard. Your odds of converting that are just so much greater than what people expect. A lot of times it's close to over 60% a lot of times. Your own 29, so it's 1 yard you need to get there. So that one was a 5.1% win probability loss. Moving forward, fast forward to the overtime, and this is one that everyone saw. The Jets' final drive, they had 3rd and goal at the 1 yard line, had a chance to win the game. Zach Wilson scrambled, looked more to me like a designed run. I don't think he had a single receiver out there.
I believe officially that the league tagged it as a run, not as a scramble.
Okay, yeah, I didn't, because looking at it, it didn't seem like he even had any receivers over there. And they had, I forget who it was for Tennessee, but that stayed home on that one, was able to push him out and made a mistake instead of throwing it away, took a 3-yard loss on the play. Huge execution error cost the Jets 30.4% win probability, which comes in at number 3. Again, like with the New England one, part of this drop is attributed to what happened on the next play. Coach Saleh choosing to take the field goal or attempt the field goal instead of going for it, even on 4th and goal at the 4-yard line, elected to go with the field goal, which they made, but was still an error. Pre-snap difference between going for it and attempting the field goal was 13.1%, which was our largest error of the weekend. And this is something I looked at in a little bit more in depth today. Even on the field goal, they were at 55% prior to the field goal. They're 50%. They were assuming half a win as a tie, or accounting for a tie as half of a win. If they go for it and they convert, it's a touchdown. They win the game. They're at 100%. If they don't get it, Tennessee is still 1st and 10 at their own 4-yard line. They're backed up in their own territory. New York Jets would still be at 48, almost 49% win probability, even if they fail on 4th down. The required conversion rate came out to like 12% on that. So 1 out of 10 times. All you need to do is convert that 1 out of 10 times, which is well below what you would expect a team to convert in that situation. So this one was a clear go. Huge error, like I said, the number 1 error of the weekend. Ultimately, it would be the points. Yep.
I was going to say, I'm shocked that Wilson didn't just throw the ball away, because you cannot take that loss. You even if you had an illegal man downfield, if you threw the ball away and you took a 5-yard penalty, like that's about the same as taking the loss in the first place. Mm-hmm. Like you at least had to try to throw it away. Right. Just bad awareness on his part.
Yeah, and it just, I think they asked Saleh after the game. I'm sure they did. He was planning to go for it if they didn't get it on 4th and goal, what I heard, which would have been, I think, closer to, at that point, like 24%, which would have been the best decision. Still would have been the best decision, but almost double that at 4th and goal at the 1. So, yeah, I agree. It was very surprised to see him hang on to that ball and go out of bounds. So ultimately, they got the win, but it came down to a missed field goal by the Titans that converted 2 4th downs on that drive with Derrick Henry. 19 seconds left. Randy Bullock missed the field goal, which dropped them from 35.8% down to 0, obviously, which was our most impactful play of the week. But if they could have gone for it, it might not have even come down to that for the Jets. But they were able to get it out. Hopefully they can learn from that next time.
And 35.8% win probability, I mean, you're basically coming down from 50 there, not from 100, mm-hmm. because they kick that field goal. The Jets have the ball with like 10 seconds left.
Yeah.
That game probably ends with a tie.
Yeah, most likely. And we kind of were discussing it here in the office today too. even if you don't, or if you're going for it, you're the Jets, you don't get it. Like we said, they're still close to pretty much favored to tie in that game. Does Tennessee play it a little bit more conservatively and play for the tie because they are backed up, don't want to take a risk of a turnover?
At that point, a field goal wins the game. So they're playing for the field goal at that point.
Yeah, but being backed up, they may not play for the field goal, but they may also not risk it as much and say, we've got a tie in our pocket at this point, if we can get some plays and get down. But it's just more, it kind of gets into that behavioral aspect of what you think they're going to do on the other side. But going for it was definitely the right call there. Paid off playing the results. It paid off, but we don't play the results. So that was a big error.
All right, let's talk about the 5 most impactful play from the weekend's games from EdjSports. For our audience, these are the plays that had the most impact on the game in terms of win probability, either positive or negative. And we've kind of gone through most of these already, actually. But we haven't gone through number 5 yet.
Yeah, a lot of negative on this list. Looking at it, like I've said before, we always look at it from the offense's perspective. Number 5 was the one that actually was good for the offense. So the Giants were down 3. Their late game drive against the Saints, trailing 21-18. They had 3rd and 7 on their own 38. Even if they don't get it, it's an obvious go situation on 4th down. They were able to get a pass to Kenny Golladay, 28 yards to the New Orleans 34. They were able to run that clock down a little bit, get the field goal to force overtime, went on to win that game in overtime on the first drive. Both New York teams won in overtime. But this play, that completion on 3rd and long, increased the Giants' win probability by 23.5%, from 25.2 up to 48.7. Again, with a tie counting as half a win at 50% there. Like you said, we covered.
I was going to say the Saints-Giants, just to point out, is another game where the wrong team won, according to DVOA. In fact, the post-game win expectancy says the Saints should win a game with these splits 85% of the time. But it doesn't matter what the stats say. What matters is, did you win? And they didn't.
Was that the highest this week?
Yes. Well, that was the highest for a team that actually lost. I mean, the highest
team that lost, right?
was, the Bills had like a 99.9999% chance of winning.
Yeah, there was no chance. I think we had that like 86% before the game for the Bills. But yeah, that Saints game, that does not surprise me, because watching, didn't watch the whole game, but going back and forth, kind of trying to keep track of all of them like I normally do, just seemed like the Giants had no business even being in that game. Joe Judge, after his comments last week, still made some errors. Was kind of sucks that he was able to come out with the win, maybe, not facing the criticism he probably should, or as much of it after that game and after his comments last week. But that's not going to work out for him every single week. So we'll see how that goes moving forward. But moving on, like you said, we've covered these last 4 come from the Titans, Jets, Patriots, Bucs games. Number 4 was the Patriots, that 3rd down play where Mac Jones's pass was incomplete, going from 3rd and 3 to 4th and 3, and then the error to kick the field goal on the next play dropped them from 59.9% down to 31.9%. It's a drop of 28%. The Jets tied, again, 3rd and goal at the Tennessee 1. Wilson takes the loss of 3 there. That dropped them by 30.4%, from 85.4 down to 55 on the dot. Number 2 is the Patriots, down 2. The field goal we mentioned, Nick Folk's kick, that's no good, was 31.9% decrease. And then the Randy Bullock kick, like I just mentioned, was a decrease of 35.8% for the Titans in that one.
So those are the top impactful plays of week 4, brought to you by EdjSports. Now let's talk about best decisions from the coaches. These are decisions coaches made that had the most positive impact on the game in terms of win probability. Let's start with number 5.
Yeah, no, so number 5 goes all the way back to Thursday night. Jaguars-Bengals tied at 14 late in the 3rd quarter. Jacksonville faced 4th and 2 at the Cincy 38. Chose to go for it in this situation, which Urban Meyer doesn't show up on our worst decisions, but he did have a bad decision late, choosing to punt, and the Bengals ended up going down, we know, kicking the field goal to win that game. But in this situation, he went for it, increased the Jaguars' win probability by 3.7%, from 42 over 38.3 when kicking a field goal, attempting a long field goal in that situation.
Urban made some bad decisions after the game also.
Oh, I had heard about some of that here in the office. I still haven't seen any of that. I thought that was some old news, but sounds like that happened this weekend then, or Thursday.
Yeah.
So moving on now to number 4, Cowboys-Panthers. Cowboys-Panthers tied at 7. Mike McCarthy just shy of midfield on his own 46-yard line, just a minute remaining in the first quarter. 4th and 1, set at the Dallas 46, chooses to go for it. This is kind of a no-brainer these days. More often than not, you're going to see coaches go for those 4th and 1s around midfield. Not always, but in this situation, McCarthy chooses. Dak Prescott was able to get 21 yards on this one. Increased their pre-snap win probability by 4.2% up to 65.3 versus 61.2 on a or 61.1 on a punt there near midfield. Number 3, this guy shows up on our top 5 best and worst decisions this week. It's the first-year coach Arthur Smith in Atlanta, leading 23-22 late in the third quarter at the Washington 42, kind of like I've mentioned on here before. We're talking about kind of in that no man's land, but at 4th and 2, you got to go for it, and that's what he did. It was a 4.4% pre-snap increase. And this was when Matt Ryan got sacked. There was a roughing the passer call on this that paid off. This one, I think, from what I saw, could have gone either way, that penalty. But the Falcons benefited, were able to get the first down there via penalty, increased their win probability after the snap by about 11%. But that pre-snap increase was 4.4% at number 3. So number 2 is Washington football team, Ron Rivera, Riverboat Ron. Although he doesn't really live up to that name as much here lately in some of these games and some of these decisions we've seen from him. But in this case yesterday, he did. Trailing 3-0 early in the game, early in the second quarter. 4th and 1 at the Atlanta 36-yard line, chooses to go for it. They didn't convert on this one. Antonio Gibson was stopped, got no gain on this. But the decision to go for it was correct. More often than not, like we said, you're going to convert. You're going to get a 1-yard gain. But this was a 4.6% pre-snap increase in pre-snap win probability. And then coming in at number 1 is a guy a couple of weeks ago we hammered on, had a bad game against, I think it was the Arizona game. But this week, opening drive, Mike Zimmer and the Vikings marched down the field. They went 75 yards and scored on this drive. 4th and 1 at the Cleveland 9, instead of settling for a field goal, chose to go for it for a 5.3% pre-snap increase in win probability. They converted because they went on to score the touchdown. Unfortunately for the Vikings, that was the only points of the day that they scored in a loss. But Zimmer takes home the number 1 decision of the week this week at 5.3%. A rather smaller increase to be our number 1, but just kind of goes to show a lot of teams weren't really in situations this week like we saw with John Harbaugh late in the game a couple weeks ago, and other teams made big errors, as we'll get to in just a moment.
Yeah, I was going to say, to me, the biggest thing is what would have been the best decisions turned into the biggest errors. So let's talk about the 5 worst decisions, the big blunders that had a negative impact on win probability.
Yeah, so starting at number 5 is the 49ers, Kyle Shanahan, sitting tied at 7. This is early in the third quarter, early in the second half. I think this was probably that opening drive of the second half. 4th and 3 at their own 47. Chooses to punt. It costs him 4.2%. This is one, like we've talked about, you're in that midfield area. Is the field position really worth it? He ended up punting 37 yards. It's not worth what you can get if you're able to convert with 3 yards, which you would think they should. Trey Lance was in at this point, which kind of opens things up for them a lot, it seems, with his rushing ability as well. May not be able to as good of a passer right now as they have had with Garoppolo, who's been pretty good this year so far, but having just the threat of him to run, which he did on multiple times, especially late in the game, converting that 4th down when they were kind of in desperation mode. Was a 4th and 10, was able to rush and run the ball and convert. This one, a 4th and 3 near midfield, was a 4.2% error. Number 4, going back to the Jets game, this was when we mentioned it at the top of the show, trailing by 2, 4th and 1 at your own 29. Again, don't want to beat a dead horse on these. You're in your own territory, but it's 1 yard. If you should be able to get that. An NFL team, on any given play, a 1-yard gain is not a good gain. You're disappointed if you only get 1 yard, but that just shows, a lot of times you're able to get that, like we've said, up to 60, in the 60% a lot of times. So this one cost the Jets 5.2%, so 1% more than what Shanahan had there at number 5. Number 3, we talked about Bill Belichick coming in. with that field goal attempt at the end of the game, 10.1% drop in pre-snap win probability on that 4th and 3. Like we mentioned, even if you make that field goal, you're probably about 50% to lose anyway, with Tom Brady on the other side, 2 timeouts, a minute left. That's a lot of time for a guy like that and an offense like that to get down the field just needing a field goal. Number 2, I mentioned Arthur Smith showed up on our best decisions. He also shows up on our worst decisions. This decision is one, it's in their own territory. It's not a 4th and 1. So this is one, it's late in the game that would probably, and we've gotten criticism on these types of decisions in the past, but it's defensible. The Falcons were up to face 4th and 4 at their own 31-yard line with 2 minutes left in the game. They still have all 3 of their timeouts. Washington has 2 timeouts left. So this situation, you go for it. If you get it, you can run the clock down. They're going to use their timeouts, but you are still able to run about half that time down if you don't get another first down even. If you don't get it, you're still looking at probably about 1:55 left in the game. Washington only needs a field goal. In these situations, we see so many teams play it conservatively. They're already, at a fairly manageable field goal at that point, mid-50s. They're in the Dome there in Atlanta. Atlanta can use all their timeouts. Best case scenario, they can get the ball back 1:20 left, down only 1 point. Worst case scenario, they score a touchdown. They take all the time. They lose. That's what happened anyway. Washington went down. They punted, was able to get to score. I don't think actually they got the 2-point conversion. They ended up getting the ball back late.
The 2-point conversion. So yeah,
got the ball back late in the game and were able to win it. So you want to leave the ball in your best player's hands. You don't want to punt that ball away and give the other team the chance to go on the offensive and go down and score. So this one ended up being a 13% error, coming in just behind the number 1 we talked about, Robert Saleh's decision there on 4th and goal at minus 13.1%.
Yeah, which would have been even bigger error if it had been 4th and goal from the 1 instead of from the 4. But just teams just they depend on their defenses rather than depending on their offenses. Like, you can trust your offense to convert a lot of times more than you can trust your defense to hold back the other team.
Yeah, and that Washington defense in that game, they have not been what anyone has expected them to be this year. I think they're in the bottom 8 in DVOA.
Yeah, their defense so far in DVOA is 28th.
Yep. And the Tennessee as well, in the Jets game, the Titans have been, the last few years have not been good. That's, the offense hasn't really been there this year.
The Titans are 26th. So, why are you trusting your defense?
Yeah, your offense, like you said, is more likely to convert than to trust your defense to make stops there. So just a couple of decisions, you could make, we'll have people that will disagree, like I mentioned with the Arthur Smith one, a 4th and 4, but you got to consider the time if you don't get it. Like I said, a lot of times those teams down 2 just need to field goal, play it more conservatively because they don't want to give the ball. The Giants did it against Washington, played a little conservatively, kicked the field goal. Washington went down and got the field goal. So just going for it, teams so often I think underestimate what their chances are of converting in those situations, and they let it come down to just that one play. They don't really plan for it on the 3rd downs either, where if they've got a 3rd and 5, they look at it as we've got to get all 5 yards unless you're in kind of those obvious situations, instead of saying if we can get 3, they're only expecting they're expecting us to go for the full 5. If we can kind of come up short and give us a manageable 4th and 1, we're going to go for that. So you get 2 plays to go for it.
Yep. Teams need to think more about getting 2 plays to get the yards rather than 1 play. That wraps up the worst decisions of the week. If you're interested in seeing more about these plays, check out the top 5 section on EdjSports.com and read Risky Business by Frank Frigo, who this week highlights Joe Judge and his anti-analytics approach and how it is costing the Giants this season. Even though they did win yesterday.
And Frank also added a little bit in there, going a little bit deeper, like I mentioned earlier, not having all the numbers on me, but into that Belichick decision to show just how strong of a go that was. So that is on there as well, in addition to the Joe Judge analysis.
Let's wrap up this week's show with a little bit of preview of Monday Night Football. This is the Las Vegas Raiders and the Los Angeles Chargers, 2 teams that DVOA does not like as much as their records. the line is currently Chargers by 3. And I hope you were able to get money on this when it was Chargers by 3.5, because we like Vegas in this game to cover, but I sure like them a lot better at 3.5 than at 3, because then you get that Chargers win by field goal, you would get a win. But that's no longer the case, because now the line is 3. The Vegas pass rush has been very good this year, but only 26th at adjusted sack rate. I think that's sort of interesting. They're bringing pressure, but not necessarily getting home. The Raiders' offense is 9th passing, but a dismal 30th rushing. But the Chargers' defense has the same strength and weakness. They're 15th against the pass and 31st against the run. So this is a fun little resistible force versus movable object when it comes to the Raiders on the ground in this game. Ian, what are you thinking about this matchup? Tell me what the Edge Sports model has to say.
Yeah, we're sitting there. We've kind of like you, we favor the Raiders. Seems like every game this week we favor the Raiders, or this season, sorry. Starting in week 1, we like them straight up a little bit over the Ravens. Week 2 against Pittsburgh, we like them to cover the spread. Last week was the same. And they keep winning this week. We're higher on them again versus the market. Like you said, this game is at -3 in favor of the Chargers. We see this as closer to a 1-point spread in favor of the Chargers. So at that 3-point mark, we like the Raiders to push or cover 51% of the time, or sorry, to cover 51% of the time, to push or cover 58% of the time. So we're sitting at Los Angeles to win by a field goal or less, or the Raiders to win 58% of the time. As far as straight up, we've got Las Vegas at 46% win probability. The market, last I checked, they were around 40 to 41. So a little bit of value there. You can get a little bit of a discount based on what we actually see this as. And then the over under, the market has this pretty high at 51.5. We see it even higher. We're at a 57-point fair value total. So looking at this game to go over 51% or 51 points, 65.2% of the time. So in almost 2/3 of our simulations, we like this game to go over that 51.5-point total. And then looking just at what we've got here, looking at the public money, 64% of the bets are on the Chargers, but only 51% of the money. So a slight edge there comparing those two maybe for Vegas. And like I said, we like the Raiders both against the spread and a little bit better to win this one straight up this week as well.
Yep, I am in agreement with you there. The Chargers just don't do really well. They didn't do well in the preseason DVOA projections, and even their actual rating through 3 games is not as good as you would think it would be, because they beat the Chiefs, but the Chiefs themselves haven't been as good as they usually are, because their defense has been so terrible. So, what did we really learn about the Chargers offense from the fact that they could score against the Chiefs? Not much, really. That wraps up the Week 4 recap show. Make sure you go to Edge Sports and check out their analysis from Week 4 on EdjSports.com. Download the Edge Sports app to get your betting preview for Monday Night Football and every matchup this season. You can head over to FootballOutsiders.com to read Mike Tanier's Monday recap, getting you all set for the Bills-Cardinals Super Bowl that we know is now inevitable. And Audible's at the line as well. And we'll have up 1 Foot in Bounds reviewing the weekend in college football later today. Tune in tomorrow at 1 o'clock to hear Scott Spratt and Derek Klassen discuss players to target on the waiver wire for your fantasy teams. And again, we are live on YouTube every day at 1 o'clock with some combination of me, Mike Tanier, Scott Spratt, and more Football Outsiders folks. You can find this show on FootballOutsiders.com and the Football Outsiders Podcast Network. Remember, though, if you want to interact with us and actually chat with us during the show, you can only do that on the live streams. So please make sure you check out the live streams, 1 o'clock Eastern every day, now at YouTube at the Football Outsiders page on YouTube. All right, Ian, thank you so much for coming on the show today, and we will talk again next week. And for all of the listeners, I hope you'll check out Scott Spratt's show tomorrow, and I will see you again Wednesday at 1 o'clock with Mike Tanier. So enjoy Monday Night Football, everybody.